and welcome to Mahamudra for the People. Today is but June 7th or so, 2020. Um, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all. I wanted to see if, as a place to start, if anybody had any questions about either Mahamudra or what we've been doing up till now, or really anything. And then maybe we can do a little bit of sitting, and then I have two short songs, one by Milarepa and one by Third Karmapa that I'd like to share. And then, yeah, we'll get back into shamatha. Um, so, any questions? Yeah, pain.
I don't want to cause conceptual proliferation with all this, but I wanted to ask, and you've answered this before, what is mantra Mahamudra? I've heard this term.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if you'd be willing to try and connect, ask like what are the Rushini aspects of Mahamudra?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good questions. So there is a kind of a system of classification that's developed over the past 1,200 years or so. Ultimately, like the whole thing is not real, and then of course, this classification system serves some kind of purpose. Mahamudra is typically split into three categories, although not in all cases. Sometimes you could say it's split into three cases or three types. So there is what's called Sutra Mahamudra, uh, Tantra or Mantra Mahamudra, and Essence Mahamudra. And so Sutra Mahamudra would be what we've come to experience in most contemporary instruction or kind of pedagogy around the practice of Mahamudra, which is typically the practice of shamatha for X period of time until your shamatha is stable, relatively speaking, and then the introduction of Laktong or superior insight, this kind of Vajrayana Vipassana, I'd say, and then the union of both of these, which is Mahamudra itself. Um, and in this particular case, no highest yoga tantra, empowerment is necessary. And then there's mantra or tantra Mahamudra, which you might find, for example, in associated with Tumo or associated with illusory body practice, illusory body practice in particular. Illusory body practice, well, technically you don't need an empowerment specifically for Tumo or specifically for illusory body or, clear light yoga, of the six yogas. You need obviously an empowerment to perform, highest yoga tantra practices, which is what you need to undergird any kind of experience leading up to the practice of Tumo and or leading up to the practice of illusory body or clear light. And so this big controversy kind of arose. I believe was it Sapan? I think it was Sapan Sakyapantita was very critical of Marpa, and there's this really good blog post that Sarah Harding wrote about this, where the Sakyas were very critical of the Kaju for uh, implementing Mahamudra without, this kind of outside of the highest yoga tantra context. And the irony is that folks like Maitrepa and Gampopa um, really kind of taught this more kind of sutra essence. I'm sorry, sutra oriented Mahamudra, not necessarily derived from Yidam practice. So, for example, like in Secret Vajrayogini, um, one really is blending a very kind of elaborate visualization of oneself as Vajrayogini with her mind essence, right? And there's this beautiful place of combination for, you know, this union of Mahamudra and, highest Yoga Tantra practice. Of course, illusory body practice is very closely related. Now, then there's Essence Mahamudra, and Essence Mahamudra is kind of like the kind of tantric songs of Saraha and all of the other siddhas, where and in this way you could kind of say that it's a little bit more like also like early Dzogchen Sashati Yoga and it's from Longchenpa back, but even before Longchenpa, the real um, early Tibetan and late Central Asian Dzogchen. And then it's of course also very similar to kind of like the balls and Hindu tantrikas and these songs, right? This singing, this kind of placement of sometimes it's called Sahajayana. So you find a lot of texts, especially published in India, talk about Sahajayana, this kind of like great bliss, experience of great bliss, which was kind of shared. There was a lot of kind of cross cultural pollination between Shakta tantrikas, Buddhist tantrikas, Vaishravana tantrikas, and then these kind of Sufi, mystics as well. There was a lot of really fascinating and beautiful interplay between them, and that's kind of more of this, the essence Mahamudra. Now, within the context of Mahamudras we find in the Kagyu tradition, and this also actually there's similar techniques in illusory body practice. So in Rushan, in Dzogchen, one is kind of like actively playing out not only the six realms, but every kind of mode of existence we can imagine. So gods, demons, then beings of the six realms, worms, everything, and you act these out in some cases. Or then there's this inner Rushan purification through visualization. In the Mahamudra tradition, there is this long-standing tradition of going to places to test your realization. So, in monastic settings, and there's some good examples of this in Tapotashi Namgyal's Moonbeams of Mahamudra, of which there are a couple of different translations, where practitioners are urged to go in cells, meditation cells, and kind of berate one another and really insult them and really like get into like oh pain, your mother smells like garbage and like all this stuff and just really 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 trying to get under the person's skin, and then the person who's meditating is resting into the non-dual state, and this is a way of training in the the emptiness of sound, for example. um, so there's that component, and you find the same thing with the illusory body, where as one is kind of the main practice is there's pure and impure illusory body. With the impure illusory body, one is really kind of focusing perhaps on oneself as the deity, and so you go around and walk into a store and maybe pick up like a chicken and ask how much do these grapes cost, and they're like like what's wrong with you, and it's like that's fine, and you pick up some milk, and you're like how much is this pizza, until they're like you need to leave, and so you work with shame, you work with um, being regarded as not particularly bright, uh, all of the things that we try to hide from, in our daily lives, right? This constant kind of bolstering and padding of uh, of ego. So it's a little similar in that regard. Does that make sense? Yeah, yeah, good. Yeah. Any other questions? It could be anything. No. Okay. Okay. Um, Good. Well, so I wanted to share let's start off with this Milarepa song. Um, so, and maybe from here we can just move right into about, I don't know, 12 minutes of just shamatha, or whatever non-conceptual practice is, where you're at. So if it's shamatha or if you're practicing vipassana, it could be that. But so this is a song called "The Five Complete Perfections of the Definitive Meaning" by Milarepa. And so just allow yourself to hear, these words, um, and as you do, let whatever experience arise. Don't worry about doing anything. Don't worry about controlling anything. Don't worry about making anything happen. Just rest into the experience of mind. So this begins with Milarepa saying, "The three jewels, the very basis, have always been present, complete in the depth of uncontrived awareness. There's no need to make any prayers to these. Free of counting and wishing, the yogi knows bliss. The Yiram deities grant the two cities, ultimate and relative, complete in the depth of radiant clarity. They're nothing to accomplish. There's no need to meditate on this generation's state. Where the body appearing is the Yiram's kaya, the yogi knows bliss. Gatherings of dakinis and protectors clear away adverse conditions and obstacles. Complete in the depth of mind's natural state, there is no need to give them torma offerings. Resting at ease in sixfold consciousness, the yogi knows bliss. Your own thoughts are these obstructing spirits. Complete in the depth of dharmata are the apparitions of ghosts. There's no need to raise a ritual din to chase them away. With concepts appearing as dharmakaya, the yogi knows bliss. All scripture and reasoning and words rely on verbal conventions. Complete within the depth of radiant clarity is all experience. There is no need to make efforts in studying all of this. With appearances arising as text, the yogi knows bliss. And then just one last little 3-line thing from the Kunja Gyalpo. Establish the Buddha no place other than the essential nature of mind itself. As this is the reality of your own mind, do not look elsewhere. If you search for the victorious one in an outer expanse, you will not find them. And let's sit together for 13 minutes. when you're ready, begin to come back to this group. So, um, there's one other song I'd like to share. This one's uh, a hair longer than the Milarepa song, but so anyway, it's from this vision experience that the third Karmapa Rongjung Dorje had of Saraha, and so Saraha was considered one of the early, um, perhaps even the founder, so to speak, of the Mahamudra tradition. Although I don't know if that could actually be possible. But in any event, a lot of people have had these kind of visionary experiences of Saraha. Um, you know, Rongjung Dorje did, Marpa did. Uh, it's kind of a little bit of a common thing, so to speak. Um, what's his name? Dujum Lingpa um, had an encounter that's written about in Buddhahood Without Meditation. Um, but so in this experience, Rongjung Dorje, who authored the Mahamudra Aspiration Prayer, which is a very, very beautiful text, in a dream meets with Saraha, and he kind of supplicates Saraha for an instruction, and then Saraha um, replies like this. He says, Emaho, this is the Guru, the great Brahman. I am your mind's nature, and in this mandala, where variety has one taste, there are no cultivators, nor things to cultivate. Hey, child, this doha is beyond speech, thought, or expression. Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, child, this doha is beyond speech, thought, or expression, so cultivate its advice. Hey, child, Mahamudra is the essence of all past, present, and future Buddhas, so stay uncomplicated. Hey, child, in effortless naturalness, a state free of extremes, realize self-aware wisdom. Its purpose is to help wanderers. Don't be distracted. Stay balanced. Amoho. Mind's nature is simplicity. It comes from nowhere and has nowhere to go, just like a crazy person. Hey, child. Like a river dissolving into the sea, it has no creation and no cessation. So stay in Mahamudra. And this is the song. So having no creation and cessation, coming from nowhere and having nowhere to go. Simplicity, effortless, natural state free of extremes. Stay balanced. The essence of all past, present, and future Buddhas. Stay uncomplicated. The great Brahman, in this case a reference to Swaha, is your mind's nature. It has one taste. There are no cultivators nor nothing to cultivate. Yeah, at some point, I'm like a good example of this. Like, I probably have like 3,000 Dharma books. And at some point, it's going to have to get into my thick skull these words, right? So take my advice. Don't buy 3,000 Dharma books. Just, keep those words in your heart. but and I'm not really joking. We have to go through whatever process we all have to go through, and we're all different, and we all have individual karma, and we all have different relationships with why we need to know a bunch of things. Um, but there's really not a lot to know. And it's interesting, there's this kind of cross-cultural complex point, I think, where, it could be that we, people who are habituated to this kind of more Western way of being and thinking about things, often needs to know the why. Like, why this, why that, why is Mahamudra this way? Why is Mahamudra different from Dzogchen? Why is Sutra different from Tantra? Why? You know, before we can engage in practice. Um, and whereas, very, very generally and broadly speaking, in the Tibetan tradition, that why is withheld from people, right? Not out of control, but out of this kind of deep understanding and appreciation for the fact that all of our conceptuality, all of our knowing, I, Justin, know this, creates such an incredible division between this kind of very intuitive, ineffable nature of mind. And so, for all of us, I think that there's this process that we all need to go through. It's kind of like a wrestling match that sometimes lasts decades of learning how to rest into ease, learning how to relax, learning how to not know everything, um, learning that that's okay, um, learning that that doesn't mean that you lack intelligence or you lack gracefulness or you lack capability. And it's also not to say don't study, but I think what comes up for me increasingly is these instructions about not making it complicated. And so when we rest into our meditation, how to be able to rest in a way that's not complicated. And usually what I find is connected to this is confidence in our practice, confidence in the view, confidence in path, confidence in the instructions that we've been given. We can always find other ones. Um, and there are so many, so you could start studying Mahamudra in the Kaju tradition and then be like, well, but there's also Mahamudra in the Gillig tradition. Okay, there's Sutra Mahamudra, and there's Essence Mahamudra, and there's Mantra Mahamudra. Oh, I wonder what the difference between that and Dzogchen is. Oh, I wonder, what the difference between, Dzogchen and Lamdre is. Oh, I wonder what the difference between Lamdre, and it just goes and goes and goes and goes. And funny thing is um, that this way of um, constant shifting is sometimes very much rooted in a desire to not want to uh, settle into simplicity because that's uncomfortable for an ego and an identity and a sense of self that uses our knowledge to locate it in relationship to everything else. There's an x-axis and a y-axis, and we're able to plot our location based on, oh, well, I've received all these empowerments. Oh, I've received this instruction. No, I practice in this lineage. And none of that matters, you know? So, you know, what does it mean to settle into a practice that is open, loose, vast, without anything to be cultivated, without a cultivator, that if anything to be added to, um, I was talking with somebody yesterday who was just said in passing, we all provide the universe what it needs, right, in terms of our activity. So, and the context of this is, Dzogchen Mahamudra. The whole point is we don't need to worry about what it is that we're doing. We don't need to worry about our activity. We don't need to worry about our practice. How our practice arises and how it progresses is naturally what it does, naturally how it is, and that's all the universe needs, right? And yet we don't always feel that way, right? Sometimes we feel like we need to add more. I need to do more, so which is very kind of, not only is it, it's materialist, it's Cartesian, it's capitalist, it's all of these things, right? It's all predicated on the fact that each one of us as practitioners has to invest energy and time and effort and all of this stuff into practice to produce something, to produce a outcome. And the truth is, in both traditions, Mahamudra and Dzogchen, there is nothing to produce, because that which we're seeking to produce has been as it is, where it is, i.e., everywhere, all the time, for eternity. And so there's nothing to search for, nothing to produce, nothing to cultivate, nothing to refine, nothing to polish, nothing to do all of these activities towards. And when we're able to approach something like shamatha this way, shamatha becomes something much more than shamatha, right? Shamatha becomes floating in an ocean of non-duality. Right? It becomes just, I saw a funny thing on Facebook the other day. I guess it just ended, but Ian Baker and Dakpo Tuku were doing some kind of Dzogchen yoga thing up in like Helsinki or something. But it was at this like spa place up there, and there's a lake with a monk standing on a paddleboard. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I've never seen that before. And I was like, oh, I hope he doesn't fall in because he's got all those robes. But, so this image of us, each one of us being on a paddleboard in the middle of the ocean of mind is really what our shamatha should be. Right? We don't need to worry about counting. We need to worry about our breath. Like if we take this advice that Saraha gives, nothing to cultivate, nothing to add, nothing to do, nothing to refine. All we do is settle into being with mind. And so then the question is, in so a few of my teachers have pointed out, and this is true, that there's basically no difference between the practice of Mahamudra and the practice of Chökchen that you find, in the Dzogchen tradition. And both of these practices is sitting and being with mind, sitting and resting into this experience without cultivating, without poking, without prodding, without beckoning, without pushing away whatever experience is arising, mental, emotional, physical, right? But then connecting to this thing that, my friend brought up the other day, whatever we do and however we arise is enough for the universe. Whatever we do and however we arise is enough for Dharmakaya. It's enough. It's an expression of Dharmakaya. There's nothing to add. There's nothing to effort. And So if we can rely on this, this kind of comes right back to this, passage from the Kunji Gyalpo. Establish the Buddha no place other than the essential nature of mind itself. This is the reality of your own mind. Do not look for it elsewhere. If you search for the victorious one in an outer expanse, somewhere other than you, somewhere other than your field of experience, you won't find it. It's not there. You know? And of course, this also means that we have to stop saying, like, I'm not good enough, or I haven't received instruction enough, or I haven't, um, received all the empowerments I should, or all the transmissions of blah, 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 blah. You know, everything is enough. You are enough. Your practice is enough. Your mind is enough. Your awareness is enough. You don't need to go to these places of saying, oh, one day when I have all the qualities needed, dot, 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 dot. One day when blah, 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 blah. You know. In another way too, I mean, this is where I really like to kind of, begin to just, lightly reflect, right? This also means there's no room for time, because if the mind has been this way forever, there's no past where it was impure. There's no present where there is the process of purification going on, and there's no future which represents the establishment of purity, right, or vastness. It's been We've been doing this dance forever. You know, when are we going to realize we're dancing? When are we going to realize um, that there's nothing else needed? And of course, the more you end up moving in this direction, the more kind of like, at home you end up feeling in this non-dual and abstract place. And from there, a lot of, it's almost as if we begin to outgrow other forms of practice, where they feel a little, they're fine, but there's a lot more efforting involved, a lot more, you know, why do I need to do this? Kind of, questions come up, right? And that's totally fine. I mean, this is part of um, even looking at the life of the Buddha, right? He was constantly disappointing people, constantly disappointing all the different teachers and sangha members that he studied with. So there were a number of different teachers that he had followed and learned their instructions and practiced them vigorously. He didn't. I mean, nobody knows, but the assumption is that he wasn't out there making a name for himself, right? But he was good at what he did, and had sangha members. And then after, he was also very discerning, and so after a while, realizing like, oh, no, this is not the way, and then switching course and practicing like this for a while with someone else. No, this is not the way. And each time people are like, man, like this, what's up with this guy? Like, um, until he went by himself to Bodh Gaya after nearly drowning um, in the Naranjana River, and sat down and more or less was like, I'm doing this my way, and was able to completely become enlightened in that moment. And then, so even first he taught these merchants. I think they're from Burma, right? A couple of Burmese merchants who were passing through the region. and then he went to Sarnath, and he taught some of his former Sangha members, but they were very critical of him at first because they're like, you totally, what'd you do, So anyway, I bring this up because like I think there's also this very kind of painful place of individuation within these religious systems that are necessarily part of the process, necessarily part of the practice. So if we like to practice Buddhism because it's not going to be nice, but because we like the community, because we like the, all that stuff is great, right? But like, that's also not entirely what this is about, right? This is about totally this like, hardcore existential liberation from suffering. And so there will be moments where, as we move through this process, we break away, or we do we live out our process, we live out our our own alchemical transformation, um, and you see this in the namtar of almost every single person who achieves realization, is that there's some point where they then end up challenging the status quo, and it's not because they need to or they want to. There is no where to go but there, because when there's this liberation from binary thinking, you don't fit in anywhere. Unfortunately. Maybe Bhumi Sparsha. Hopefully. But probably not. I mean, this is the hard thing, right? It's like but the more that we openly have awareness of this and are able to discuss it, right, the more we're actually also able to make sense of, why am I feeling this way? Why am I, what is going on in my process, etc. Yeah, Eric, is your hand raised?
I think your admonition to, like, there's such an intense joy in reading these texts for me, right? That is real. And I absolutely see how it like becomes another way of protecting myself from what the words are actually pointing to. But another just sort of edge in my practice that I'm noticing, and I'm curious if anyone else experiences this. And historically and culturally as well, I'm also just curious, like, living in such a globalized situation where like the depths of the complexity are so thoroughly understood and not understood, which like enhance the suffering of each other, and like both like an awareness of the depth of like the suffering, and like the accessibility of all of these images from all around the world, and like throughout time too, but so sometimes there's such a sweetness in like Saraha's words. But I also am wondering if like part of the evolution of this work together, and just like in the context of an evolving creative process, does floating on our paddleboard on the ocean of non-duality also like include, or like, is it include resting on an ocean of like heartbreak? And that is the point, right? If like compassion is, I think of the, I don't know, remember which Karmapa's, Mahamudra aspiration prayer, it's like so tender. And I think sometimes when I read the text, one of the problems I get myself into is that I think that I shouldn't be floating on an ocean of heartbreak. It should be something other than that. I'm trying to get away from the ocean of heartbreak, because the ocean of non-duality sounds so much more pleasant. But I know, like, I feel like that is precisely the trap. So, like, I want to resolve the minor note of the heartbreak into something else. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has that experience.
Yeah, does anybody have anything to share on that?
I could share. This is something that yeah, definitely comes up for me just sort of periodically, and I return to it. Something that I think I also, even just like this morning, I was feeling a kind of some sense of like futility or something, or like in trying to get my like samsaric world like aligned or functioning a little more like comfortably or something. And that, like, I know that's a trap, you know, but it's like it's a recurring, it's like a sitcom where the same kind of, I just get into my like same sort of conundrum of thinking. And I was appreciating too the kind of well, Lama, you've been bring up the word cosmopolitan more, you know, to just feeling, and like that was kind of you know, that was like really like helpful to me today about like how you've kind of seen it all a little bit, you know. There's like the Bill Murray like Groundhog Day trope of like, you know, talking about Buddhism, about like this kind of seen this one before, and sometimes it is like more kind of at the level of like humor, or like kind of humorous like irritation, or like becoming a little like I'm grumpier than I was when I was in my 20s. I was a little bit more of an idealistic spiritual person, and now I'm more grumpy, you know, but not like aggressively or hurtfully. So if anything, I'm more gentle. If anything, like my idealism was a little more like aggressive, you know, and I can see that like people who kind of have that kind of energy now actually like irritate me and make me a little more grumpy. And so and kind of contribute to this like this sort of conundrum sort of state. But then like what you were saying, Eric, you know, is that I think it actually, that sort of like grumpiness or Groundhog Day conundrum thing, like that like actually kind of resolves into the heartbreak thing. And then it's like, yep, like, and there's a kind of surrender, you know. And so I practiced some like nundro and prostrations this morning. We're just like lay my face flat on this ground, and like I'm not gonna win at like at any of this, you know, but like and there is a little, you know, that if there's a kind of grace in it, it's that there's a kind of peace, you know, in it, or in the kind of like the surrender of that like efforting or something. But then that, you know, that like it's true that I wish that that kind of like, you know, that heartbreak would also resolve into bliss, you know, and then that I have those two, like that I have that distinction, I know is kind of like, that's the thing that, you know, to kind of, that like will need to kind of burn up, or that can in moments or something. But yeah, that's like some of my experience with that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Travis. Does anybody else have anything to share?
It's kind of interesting that you use the paddleboard example because, you know, I'm by the beach and I've been trying to walk every day and it's been very rough. And there were these people surfing. And they're like, it's almost like they're fighting the waves because they've got to go out. But then at the same time, there were two people and they were paddleboarding and they just, so there's these people fighting, you know, the ocean of samsara. And then because I was watching them, I was like, wow, it's really amazing. Those people just like floating along in this relaxed fashion. And then these other folks are thrashing around in the waves, you know. So it's, I don't know, it was right there and you pointed it out. I mean, that's the whole pointing out. And I guess when it comes to that, the heartbreak and that, I guess the point is you just get so sick of it that you're going to sit down and practice, you know. It's a reminder, really. I'm appreciative to Eric to bring that up, really, because it's like you just need to sit down or I need to sit down, you know. And this is why I like this Mahamudra for the people. It's really practice, you know. We're not studying from a text or anything like that because, you know, I'm kind of, that is sometimes escapism. You know, it's an excuse not to practice. And this is about the doing, you know, actual practicing in person. So I appreciate the, you know, what everybody's saying and your example of the paddle board and that we get, you know, the practice. It's just keep on, just keep at it. So thanks to all.
Well, it's important too because, you know, that brokenheartedness is a direct, heartfelt awareness of the truth of suffering, right? And not in this, like, you know, big, heavy, the truth of suffering. It's, you know, sometimes the best way to understand the truth of suffering is just to watch our own reactivity over the course of a week. You know, if you just kept a little, like, you know, notebook, non-judgmental in nature, just like, you know, when I spun off, you know, how did I spin out? How did I spin out? How did I spin out? And then, of course, then we look around and we see how everybody else spins out. You know, usually, you know, especially in the beginning, it's hard to see our own spin outs and easier to see others. You know, just kind of messes up the picture a little bit. But as we practice more, we really kind of are able to see the ocean waves of samsara. And then the question then becomes like what to do with this experience of recognizing it's not really like the difficulty involved, but maybe you could say recognizing the relative ubiquity, seeming relative ubiquity of our collective suffering. Right? And what has to happen next, though, is in these moments of recognizing that, releasing into this simplicity that's non contrived, that really is rooted in this idea of rest into ease, because that's all the universe needs. Rest into ease, because that is the expression of the universe. rest into ease, and then see what happens next. You know, because if we objectify the suffering, it's much like, somebody counseling somebody yesterday whose cat maybe have to be euthanized yesterday, and um, I was talking with them about kind of just imagining the difference in perception between this person's cat and them, or myself, or any one of us, right? When we know that we're sick, or when we are feeling pain and we know what the cause is, right? We will still feel the pain and have our reaction to the pain, but because we know the cause, there is some kind of point of focus that allows us to either understand that, okay, this is treatable, or if it's not treatable, then it becomes even worse, right? And this person's cat not necessarily having that awareness, we're trying to work on just remaining mindful of how much agitation can be created when we don't know, the animal doesn't know where this pain or discomfort is coming from. I think similarly, when we don't allow ourselves the opportunity to experience insight around the nature of that experience of recognizing, this kind of suffering as it arises, then it becomes overwhelming. It becomes, a it leads us to a hopelessness, towards an inertia, towards kind of very low energy, kind of shutdown kind of place. Right? And so what we're doing then, or what we really need to do in our practice, is to let go of that brokenheartedness. And letting go of brokenheartedness doesn't mean that we are turning away from it. I think that's often a fear too. If I release, does that mean I'm going somewhere? Does that mean I'm looking away? And I think that just as much as we'll see translators battling over the right translation of terminology, this or that or this or that, right? We have to, at the same time, get some clarity on our own terminology. Really understand our practice in that kind of very granular, personal way, right? So, right now, of all of us here, it is likely that we're all going to have a different language around this, right? And there might be some shared, vocabulary. But I think that it's helpful if we let go of words a bit and let go of definitions. So, like, for example, spiritual bypassing is something people are like, ultra. It's like a highly sensitive to spiritual bypassing. Let me not spiritually bypass, right? But what that can lead to sometimes is an over, uh, kind of almost a searching for things to label spiritual bypass, including the natural, stainless, spacious purity of mind. That's not spiritual bypassing. Being able to rest into possibility of bliss in the midst of suffering is not a spiritual bypass. And so really using our practice as a way of shining a light or adjusting a lens to be able to really understand why it is that we're practicing, what it is that we're practicing, and how much of our practice is just projection grafted onto our meditation and that's it's unacceptable, yes, but unexamined, and we just do that because, oh well, that thing is good. That is good. It's good to just do this. It's good to just do this, as opposed to actually developing experiential knowledge, experiential wisdom. And this is why my root teacher, said, like, don't read too much about Mahamudra, because it's amazing how we'll just, like, like, we'll just take a piece, and put it there, take a piece and put it there, take what we just read and put it there, take, I struggle with this all the time, just personally as a practitioner, because because this was pointed out very, very early by my root teacher, and has been kind of something I've like been very fascinated by. But every single teacher I've met has said the exact same thing: don't go there, in terms of having too much of an intellectual approach to your own practice. Like, it really, we benefit so much when we settle into experience over knowledge. The same way, um, you can read all about a place. You can get a whole, like, you can get a master's degree on some particular aspect of Indian culture and never go to India, never actually see the thing. You have this, like, armchair understanding. And these days, it's so easy to have an armchair understanding of every kind of Dharma practice, because so much, so many things have been translated. And it's great, but then, somebody might say something mean to you, and you lose your temper, you fly into depression, or, like, assault somebody. And it's clear that your mind is not being transformed, So, this kind of advice around resting into the fact that nothing needs to be cultivated, resting into the fact that nothing needs to be done, resting into the fact that nothing needs to be transformed, resting into the fact that nothing needs to be purified, resting into the fact that nothing needs to be polished, resting into the fact that nothing needs to be honed, resting into the fact that nothing needs to be perfected, resting in the fact that there's nothing to do other than to be present. Right? But what does that mean? To be present, right? That doesn't mean, so, like, I'm here on the East Coast, so 1:43 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on whatever today is, the 7th of June. Right? Not that present, not that. Remaining present in the constancy of the settled, vast, expansive, timeless nature of mind. Extending all the way back, extending all the way forward, including this, including all space. It's described as luminous, meaning everything appears in its expanse and its continuum. It's clear, which means that there's this ability to know, this kind of knowability, this awareness aspect. When we say to rest in the present, it's to rest in that. It's like to rest in absolutely everything. And if we can bring our shamatha to this, if we can allow ourselves to settle into this with clarity, with ease, and with joy, and experience this, Where is brokenheartedness? Where is limitation? What is samsara? What is nirvana? And there's a felt sense, I think, that is probably to be relied on more than uh, words or terms. And the felt sense, if you've experienced this, tends to be almost, we could say alarming ease, alarming relaxation, right? Why is it alarming? It's alarming because just a minute ago I was suffering. Just a minute ago my mind was, crushing me. Or just a minute ago my mind was making everything so solid, as if to be made of diamond and unworkable. Or, just a minute ago my mind was so inert that I had no, I was completely impotent in my ability to access clarity. And so this is this kind of, really key point, because this is the thing that offers us the counterpoint to any kind of accidental solidification of whatever kind of experience we have. Right? The accidental solidification. And I agree 100% with what everybody's shared about, kind of recognizing the suffering. And the key point is to not go there in terms of making that solid and giving that form. The same way, denying the whole thing is moving in the other direction. Letting it come, letting it go, letting it go. And this really is why, like, I kind of tend to feel like our as humans, our baseline, maybe most beautiful place to be is to be like an animal and not like a complex human that has to create all this stuff and these like systems and religions and ideas and that all impact people, impact their bodies, impact how they are. Yeah, the tree, exactly. It's just something other than this heady, like constant projecting kind of being. Um, which is a refreshing place to be, like being on vacation. But you could be wherever you are. And of course, like I think it probably needs to be named that the culture we live in is not friendly to this kind of way of being. And all you need to do is kind of look at the history of literature, even, and find, there are a lot of characters that are just not well supported, right? Because they're simple, so to speak. Right? But this is the real, like, a very fascinating crux of like Milarepa's life story is, he's never really quote unquote properly educated in the Dharma. And there's this very jealous scholar who poisoned him ultimately because he was really upset. How does this person who has very little formal training know so much and is so popular and has so many students when I, who has studied X, Y, and Z and have, I can argue things this way and that, seem to pale in comparison. Um, and so I think it is important for us as Sangha to one another to remember where we are, which is a very unforgiving place with respect to simply being, like free to be you and me kind of thing, right? Like that's ultimately who we are and where we're at, especially like, in a Bhumisparsha kind of setting. But that's not where our culture is, right? And even with respect to, so there's just being, it's one thing, but then there's, information, you know, the need to justify our practice through study, through knowing a lot, through being able to have to explain, we don't need to do any of this. We can be a tree or a rock or a little puddle of water or a huge ocean or a bird, or an insect or a snake. But just as, so the practice of Mahamudra is very much this practice of not needing to justify anything. For food, for flies. Like, yeah, I've seen those flies, yeah. So how to practice in a way that is not a practice of justification. So sometimes Rigpa is translated as, Rigpa or awareness is translated as pure being or pure presence. This is where that felt sense of when we know that we have rested into pure being, pure presence, everything settles, right? There's this kind of like natural adjustment, kind of like a spiritual chiropractic, so to speak. And to use that as a counterpoint to the intensity, or even grumpiness. It's funny. I had this opportunity to talk with Keith Dahman yesterday, and he's like a huge kind of like I don't know. He's definitely somebody I admire, and I've almost like all his books. I love him and all this, and he is one grumpy guy, like super super grumpy. And while I was talking with him, I was like, wow, like if I'm not careful, like I'll end up as grumpy as him, right? And I say that lovingly. But the one thing I did notice is that the grumpiness is also an awareness of the way that people suffer. It's like, it is frustrating. It is frustrating that, we try and we show up to try and bring clarity, to help bring insight, and we see people suffering, and we see it so profoundly. And then for us as students, how we have gone to our teachers and they've been like, man, what the hell? I've been giving you instruction for so long, and you just keep, and it's not, it's not about that, right? Specifically, like, insulting anybody, but it's just about, it's like, yes, man, we're all in this boat together, and it is one screwed up situation, and we don't need to go there in terms of, uh, denigrating ourselves or others, right? But we can be um, disheartened together. That boy, whew, it's been over 2,000 years since the Buddha, and man, like we're still doing this, samsara thing, right? And we see all sorts of people from all sorts of traditions who liberate themselves and others, right? So that's a good thing, and we're all on the process, in process ourselves. But yeah, and so when those feelings, experiences arise, try to hold that super lightly and then try to release into this, expression of mind that is as vast as time, as vast as space. It's constantly pure. It is our shared true nature, our shared Buddha nature. And settle back into that. And that's what Milarepa is getting at. When he's like, you don't need. Well, he's ultimately like, you don't need to do. You don't practice. You don't need to do cha. You don't need to read or study. You just need to recognize that your mind is awakened, is pure, is vast. Is the three bodies, right? Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya, right? And that's all. And just come back to practice. And that's all cool. And then, again, to Eric's original point, like, yeah, there's so many reasons to just make it a little more complicated than that. And that's this, like, sometimes that's all our path is just like learning how to settle, learning how to take our seat, right? Kind of like walk all around the shrine room over the course of our life, looking at this and this and this and that and that and that. And then at the end, hopefully we settle. Otherwise, like, yeah, we can pick it up the next time. But settling into simplicity. As I say in Brooklyn, it's a beautiful thing. It's especially funny, like, when I was to Talopa Six Nails, I just can't, again, it was like one of the first things I was ever taught. And I'm like constantly amazed, like that's the only instruction you need, you know. And I guess I understood that intellectually, but even now I'm like, wow, God, there's just that's six little points. And then there are these huge books on things and collections, all these, things. And they're all cool, right? But we just need a little bit of stuff. We don't need to carry the weight of everything. So, does anyone have any questions or anything? Thoughts, concerns, anything you're angry about? Well, if not, I think the thing that I'd like to just kind of close with is again this passage from the Kunja Gyalpo. Establish the Buddha no place other than the essential nature of mind itself. As this is the reality of your own mind, do not look for it elsewhere. If you search for the victorious one in an outer expanse, you will not find them. So over the course of this next week, familiarize yourself with this. Just come back. So Katie being outside in Florida at the beach, let your mind be space and be the earth and be the water and be the sky and be the energy and the movement. And wherever we are, whether it's urban or suburban or in between or whatever, resting into the simplicity of being where we are, how we are, who we are, with ease, massaging away the cultivator massaging away the need to cultivate, massaging the doer, massaging the thinker, letting everything settle with natural ease. So maybe we can dedicate the merit of today's session or this week's Mahamudra for the people. May all beings recognize that they are enough for the universe. And the universe doesn't expect anything more. May every practitioner of Mahamudra recognize that their experience is enough because their mind is Buddha. The mind is vast, all-encompassing, spacious purity. May all practitioners come to recognize this. May they recognize the ease and ordinary simplicity of resting into this state. May you all be well, and may you all be yoginis and yogis of space as you move through the rest of this week. Take very good care, and I'll see you next week.